What should a man or woman do if a mammogram, MRI, or other diagnostic test finds something in their body that could be malignant? Should they biopsy it? Should they remove it? Should they treat it with mainstream protocols? Should they consider alternative protocols?
The answer is, in my view, number one, you got to have good medical care. And so if you don't get a particularly good diagnosis or a satisfactory information from your first doctor, get another one, get a third opinion if you need it. But there's really no substitute for a good diagnosis and good medical planning. That's really important. Secondly, there's nothing wrong with also considering what used to be called alternative medicine. But I'm happy to tell you that with regard to nutrition, it used to be thought of as alternative. It's now an integral part of mainstream medicine. So if a person, let's say a woman has a breast lump and she talks with her doctor and she and her doctor are going to speak together about what needs to be done. Is a biopsy appropriate or not? If so, when and what do you do? Is excision the way to go or not? In addition to all of those discussions, it is absolutely appropriate to follow as healthy as possible a diet. And that should be begun at diagnosis, hopefully before diagnosis. And there is never a time when a healthy diet is not part of the regimen.
In your book, The Cheese Trap, How Breaking a Surprising Addiction Will Help You Lose Weight, Gain Energy, and Get Healthy, you wrote a chapter called Heart Disease, Diabetes, and the French Paradox. Please explain what you meant.
There was an observation decades ago that people in France seemed to have less heart attacks than people in Britain. And the thought was the French are eating creamy sauces and so forth, and they should be having more heart attacks, but they were having fewer heart attacks. Maybe the credit went to the red wine that they were drinking. And it's true. And, at the time, the French were drinking a lot of red wine, which I think probably accounted for why they liked Jerry Lewis movies so much. But with regard to what the effects on health, the French paradox, as it was called, was not exactly accurate. Part of it was down to diagnosis. If a person in Britain died suddenly without warning, it was called sudden death. If that same person died without warning in France, it was a cardiac death. Even if in both cases it was a heart attack, they were diagnosed differently. So that skewed the numbers a little bit. Smoking was also dramatically different between the two groups. Women in Britain were more likely to smoke, women in France less likely. So there were a number of other things. But nonetheless, I mean, there's something to be said for this. The key, though, is not that creamy sauces are healthy or that charcuterie is somehow a good idea. Hunks of pig flesh are not good for anybody. But until most people have kind of forgotten that countries used to have regional diets. In the south of France, the chefs would sometimes kind of make fun of chefs from the north of France, particularly northeastern France. They would say, here in the south, down in Nice, I'm not cooking with heavy cream. I'm using olive oil. And what has happened in recent decades is that countries have become much more homogeneous. So that you'll see creamy stuff and cheese in the south of France where you wouldn't have seen it before. And that's happening in the US and everywhere. I mean, in the United States, there's a Denny's in every city and town. And that has led people to somehow imagine that better health that might have been attributable to, say, a Southern French kind of diet I think the credit for it might have been misappropriated a little bit.
In your book, The Cheese Trap, How Breaking a Surprising Addiction Will Help You Lose Weight, Gain Energy, and Get Healthy, you wrote a chapter called Hidden Hormone Effects. Please explain what you meant.
Yeah, cows make estrogens, and the estrogens get into the milk and they get into your body. They're only traces, but it's enough to affect body chemistry. And what many people may not realize is that cows are pregnant. They're impregnated every year. And I have to say, if you really think a glass of milk is what you want to drink, you ought to go and see where it came from. Because the way you make milk is surprisingly unsavory. You have an underpaid guy who works on the farm, and he takes a glove and he puts it on his left arm right up to his shoulder, and he sticks it in the anus of the cow, right up to about his elbow. And through the rectal wall, he can feel the cow's uterus, and he grabs the uterus and holds it still. And then with his right hand, he takes what looks like a knitting needle and jams it into her cervix and injects semen. And the semen came from a bull. Now, these animals are not volunteers, but she will not object because she's chained by the neck. And she's going to be pregnant now. And if she had been milked before, they're going to continue to milk her during her pregnancy. Now, when she's pregnant, she's putting out more estrogen, more progesterone that gets into the milk, and you drink it. And of course, anybody who has a heart for animals is revolted by not just that process, but by what happens 9 months after the impregnation, is that her baby is born, and right in front of her, the baby is taken away and in a wheelbarrow, and the male calves are slaughtered fairly promptly for veal. And the females are raised in isolation until they're old enough to have somebody's hand up their backside. And by about age 4, all of the cows are killed anyway, virtually all of them, because their milk production slacks off. So their normal lifespan of about 20 is cut short. Anyway, the reason I mention these kind of grotesque parts of the industry is there are a lot of people who won't eat meat because it means killing an animal, but all the dairy cows are killed. They just are made miserable for year after year before they're killed. But along the way, because of this repeated artificial insemination, they're pregnant, and the pregnant animals make estrogens, and the estrogens get into the milk, and they increase your risk of breast cancer, according to the best research that we have. Now, we do need more research here, but they seem to have lots and lots of effects. So dairy does other things that disrupt our hormonal metabolism. It disrupts male metabolism, such that prostate cancer is much more common in milk drinkers than non-milk drinkers. So milk is something that nature designed for a calf, and the calf's supposed to drink it. And then the calf is old enough to be weaned. The calf doesn't need it anymore. And we don't need to take milk from a cow, and we're better off without it.